All right, Congressman Scott Peters of California, good enough to take the time to join us here. Sir, really a pleasure to talk with you.
Thanks, JD. Thanks
a lot
for
of
having
exciting
me.
things to talk about. Let's begin with a little news of the day. It seems as if the conferee's late Monday night coming up with some type of deal, some type of arrangement here, hopefully to avert a government shutdown. What are your thoughts based on the information you know, and are you confident we will not have another shutdown in a few days?
Well, I hate the idea of spending any money on a wall. I hate the idea of government shutting down even more. So I think we're going to have to all compromise and do something we don't want to do. I think there are better ways to do border security, but I don't think shutting down the government is the answer either.
You have a really fascinating perspective on this. I want to ask you about the San Ysidro border crossing, the busiest. It is a place where there are a lot of illicit drugs that are caught by border agents there, fentanyl and many others. What is the sense from the community on the ground in the area of San Diego? What do your constituents tell you that they want to see out of the immigration fight?
Well, we love the border. We love Mexico. I always say we see it as an opportunity, not as a threat. What happens across San Ysidro is billions of dollars of economic activity on both sides of the border and tens of thousands of jobs on both sides of the border. But what we do know is that drugs, guns, human trafficking, a lot of that happens through the ports of entry. So if we want to invest in border security, it's not really about building a structure someplace where no one wants to go. It's about making sure that the customs agents and the Border Patrol can screen that cargo as it comes through. That's what we want to concentrate on. So we welcome more investments in that. We'd like to stop illicit drugs from getting through. But it's at the border, it's at the crossing, it's at the gates. That's where we need the help.
And as a San Diego member of the House, I'm curious, what do you feel like is either most misrepresented about this argument or perhaps most misunderstood at the national level?
Well, I think people, if you listen to Fox News and some of these outlets, you'd think it was a war zone. It's actually great. It's safe. People walk across it every day. We have people who work in San Diego who live in Tijuana. It's an integrated border area, both in terms of economics and culture.
I want to move on now and talk about student loan debt, specifically this new piece of bipartisan legislation. Correct me if I'm wrong. The Employer Participation in Repayment Act.
Yeah.
How does it work? What do our viewers need to know?
99 co-sponsors, Republican and Democrat. The idea is this. If you go to work for a company, they can pay off up to $50 to $250 of your student loans in a year without it being income to you. So it's not taxable to you. So it's a great way for employers to say, we're going to offer this repayment benefit to you. It's not going to you're not going to be taxed on it. And it's great for students or recovering students who have this amazing amount of debt. The average debt now out of a public university, $30,000 for each kid. I think there's $1.5 trillion of student loan debt in the economy, more than anything other than mortgage debt, more than credit card debt. So this is a burden that we have to help folks relieve, and I think that our bill would do a really good job helping employers do just that.
Is your bill based on a hope that employers would be incentivized to pay what amounts to about $5,000 a year or so for an employer? And would employers be motivated to do so out of a sense of recruitment and retention for top talent?
I think that's it. I mean, we would have, if you talk to any young person just about what's the big thing on their mind, it's student loan debt. They're not buying a house, they're not getting a car, they're living with their parents, all because they have this burden. What a great thing for an employer to be able to say, look, I'm going to give you up to $5,250 worth of debt repayment without it being taxable income to you. That's going to be a huge incentive. That's going to really help employers attract quality employees.
We're talking about 44 million Americans in this country have a combined student debt that's about $1.5 trillion. Yep. What do you see as being this when it comes to the conversation of the overall impact on the overall American economy?
Yeah, well, the funny thing is one of the groups that we heard about student loan debt from at home, the realtors. Because they're seeing that people who are so burdened with student loan debt aren't buying that first house. They're delaying that purchase. That's a drag on the whole economy, JD. So student loan debt is something that if we can help relieve the pressure. And other things, too. You want the states to keep tuition down. That's another battle. But from the federal perspective, if we can keep the burden of student loan debt down or we can help kids repay it, I think it's going to make a big difference.
You mentioned it has bipartisan support here on Capitol Hill. However, there are a lot of things that have bipartisan support that doesn't necessarily have the backing of the person who sits behind the Resolute desk. Do you feel like this is something the Trump White House would work with you on and find common ground?
Well, before it gets to the Resolute desk at the White House, we have to get it on the House floor. And I'm more optimistic about that in this Congress with Mrs. Pelosi rather than Mr. Ryan. I think that we're likely to deal with this issue in a serious way. I don't think we were able to get that, despite all the co-sponsors we had last time. I think we had 130. We weren't able to get a vote on the floor. This time I think we should be able to do that, and that's the first step.
Yeah, it's progress moving forward.
Right.
All right, fair enough. I do want to ask you about House Energy and Commerce. Pretty high-profile hearing coming up as it comes to the T-Mobile and Sprint merger. Right. We've had this conversation in the M&A, the merger and acquisition space before, but what are you looking specifically to hear out of the? It's going to be two high-profile names, Marcelo Claret and John Ledger. What do you want to know from them?
Well, you know, we already saw the government nix a merger between AT&T and the T-Mobile because of concerns about competition. And we have to get the facts about that. What's the competition going to look like? What's the effect on Lifeline? Because these two organizations are the ones that tend to provide service to the lower income prepaid phones, that kind of sector. We need to make sure that that continues. So we're going to have a lot of questions about what it's going to look like after the merger. And that's going to help us satisfy ourselves that this is the right thing to do. Ultimately, it's a decision of the regulators, but Congress, in our oversight responsibility, can shine a light on this, get the facts out, make sure the public knows what we're in for, and make sure that the regulators can't be too sneaky.
And a similar move last year with AT&T and Time Warner. The president at that time made the argument this is far too much power that's concentrated in the hands of too few. Is that a backing that you support with concerns, and do you think that this would be something that the Trump White House and your Republican colleagues would also have concerns about?
Well, generally, I think we favor more competition. We think more competition is better for the consumer. Yeah. So, you know, if these two companies aren't going to succeed except if they merge, that's one thing. But I think in general, our bent would be to have more competitors. We think that's better for consumers.
Congressman Pierce, really appreciate you taking the time.
Appreciate it.
Wrap things up here from Washington. Toss it back to you in New York.